Welcome back, and welcome to Disc 1, Module 3, the first arena, the physical arena. And we are finally diving into the actual arenas. I trust that you have taken the time to go through and listen to the introduction, as every one of these modules builds upon the previous one. So we would ask that you, if you haven't, go back and listen, and make sure you at least have a mental image of these arenas and how they look in your mind, and kind of have some expectation of what you think these arenas have in them and what is involved in an arena. I would like you to think of the arenas as a description, as a body of information that represents a place. In other words, if you've never been to no, let's back it up. Let's say it's a fictional writer and he's wanting to describe a facility on a planet that you've never been to, which would be any planet but ours. And that facility has technology that we've never even heard of. Okay, I'm probably just going right down the line of a Star Trek series or something of that nature. And the novelist wants to describe to you enough physical parameters or enough tangible parameters so that your mind's image can be compelling enough for you to believe in it, for you to understand it, and for you to operate within it. And he's going to, of course, set a story in there, and he's going to represent his characters through that place, and that place is going to act and react according to the situations that abound. And I'm not saying these are fictional arenas, although they are just simply part of a model. But by doing that, it'll help you build this picture in your mind. And feel free to use the pentagon and shape of an arena, and feel free to physically make it an arena. Now, in this first module, the physical arena, this is going to be relatively straightforward. I shouldn't tell you anything too revealing, seeing as we all interact with the physical arena day to day. But at the same time, you never know where I might even surprise myself. So let's jump right into it. Here's the physical arena. It's the outer arena, and it's the in the rainbow. It's that violet color. And it's external from all the other arenas. It kind of acts as a protectant of the spiritual arena, almost, being six arenas away. But it's also the physical arena is also the manifestation of all the other arenas to some degree. It's kind of the end result of everything that we think and everything that exists in the other arenas, including, of course, the eternal. And if you consider the fact that God created the heavens and the earth, you can see where the eternal arena physically created the physical arena, and that eternal arena has direct access to the physical arena without having to go through the other arenas, and we'll see that here momentarily. But this physical arena borders everything else. Without the physical arena, you really don't have the other six arenas, because this is, in our model, these are arenas of the human experience. We are not, we would include in this physical arena everything from the heavens, the stars, the universe, our atmosphere, the birds that fly in it, the animals, everything, all the way down to the core of the earth. To the depths of the oceans, to the animals that are in the ocean and on the ocean and in the air and on the land. So the physical arena is it's our physical space. It's everything that we interact with. It's everything that we interpret as physical and as quote unquote reality around us. So the definition of that physical arena is basically the reality around us that we experience as we move through life. It's our universe, nature, atmosphere, man-made products and materials and architecture. It's our kinesthetic responses and reactions to the interactions of each of these realities. Not to confuse that last bullet point with the sensual arena. but it's right up to that point of contact where we go from the physical arena to the central arena. Is that point of contact where we take it in, and once it is processed, once it starts the process, once the light hits the retina, once the finger touches the stove, the moment that the sound wave reaches our ear and begins to be interpreted by our senses, that's where it is now that's where it's left the physical arena. But rather, other than that, the physical arena is everything that's around us. And to understand, and the reason we create this delineation, because later the delineations are going to be much more a little less defined and a little less obvious, so we want to get you used to creating delineations. But also, I need to be able to refer to the physical arena in future explanations and have you understand the point at which I'm taking it up to and not going any further than. Also recognize that whatever laws govern the physical arena stay in the physical arena. They may get duplicated in another arena potentially, or the laws in the emotional arena may have applicability in the subconscious arena, but each of those arenas have their own set of laws. And just because they have a similar set of laws, or a similar law, or the same law as another arena, doesn't mean that the two are mingled. They are specifically segregated from one another with their own laws. And that's important because the coupling has to take place as a result of one arena aligning with the other arena. It's kind of like a handshake or a handoff. If you want to look at it, it's different tribes or different gangs and different territories, and in order to cross from one boundary to another, it is necessary for there to be a proper handoff. And so in the physical arena, I can't take a bologna sandwich and ingest it into my emotional arena. That won't work. I can eat the bologna sandwich, and during the process, I'm ingesting through the senses its smell and its taste and its kinesthetic appeal to my hands and how it feels, maybe even the sound of the lettuce and tomato crunching. But the food that's physically going into me is staying in the physical arena the entire time. Now, interestingly enough, as I take that in, I'm taking in nutrients. And you say, but now they're inside of me. But still, my body is part of the physical arena. My physical body and what nutrifies it is part of that physical arena. And it all stays in that physical arena. So let's take a look at the purpose or the job of the physical arena. Why do we have it in our model? Well, the purpose of the physical arena is to complete the circuit of the 7 arenas. Number one, I'm not saying that's necessarily the most important, but it is the first thing that I want to point out. It completes the circuit. And I took the pentagon and I kind of folded it over on itself around a donut. And if you'll notice, the violet at the very top is now connected to the spiritual or the eternal arena. This is what allows it to, this is what I mean by it completes the circuit. Of course, we see when we utilize the pentagon, we see the physical arena as an external arena. And that's because it helps you visualize it touching, it being the physical world all the way around you, and it makes sense in the model as we move closer to the eternal arena that it would be in a peripheral type of arena. But when we change the shape and make it look like it does here, we see that it completes the circuit. In other words, I don't think oftentimes people recognize that we have, we call it a circle of life, but maybe we're not so sure why. This is why. It's because there is a circle of life. We are born into this world. Job said, naked I came into the world, naked I shall leave. We're born into this world, and we operate within this circle, and then we leave and face an eternity. an eternity. But at the same time, all throughout our life, the eternal arena has an impact on us. And it is the only, I keep saying this and we'll get to it later, but it's the only arena, the eternal arena is the only arena that can directly affect, the eternal arena is the only arena that can directly affect the physical arena without going through all the other arenas. And that's because it is the completion of the circuit. And I've said it before, 7 is the number of completion. It just seems to be kind of quaint there, that and ironic that those two go hand in hand. It also provides a tangible interpretation of light, as well as a starting and ending point, kind of hand in hand with the circuit. When I say that, I mean it is a starting and ending point. It is a place where we can take all of our thoughts and let them materialize. But at the same time, it's also where all of this starts. A baby is born physically into this world, and with him, he brings his soul, and through life, he develops his personality / spirit. And so his starting point is here, but yea, his ending point will also be here in life, but at the same time also in our physical arena, in our description. It provides a tangible interpretation of these electromagnetic frequencies that we can actually experience through the 5 senses. You know, you got to kind of take your mind out and let it wander for a minute and consider, all right, we don't have a tangible world by which to relate to, and everything is nothing but an interpretation of these frequencies. Well, we might as well be computers or some sort of an organism that does not interact with such a physical world. We would just be spirits. We would be figments, if you will, of an imagination, of a concept. And that's not the way it was intended. This tangible interpretation of light is very revealing, and it's also liberating. I mean, it's exciting. It's what gives us the expectations that we have, and the joy, and also the hope. And the physical arena is so full of signals and signs, and in nature, and in the stars, and in many aspects of the physical arena, we're able to see our hope. We're able to cultivate out of this physical arena our success and our prosperity, and that which manifests stature in our lives. We're able to go through trials and tribulations that give us character and add different elements to our lives. And this physical arena just is chock full of lessons and chock full of opportunity all at the same time. So it gives us that tangible interpretation of the light that we have, as we've seen in the intro, that everything is made up of. And I'm glad, because I wouldn't just want to be part of a stream of light. To be physical and to live in a physical world is a blessing and an opportunity. And then finally, to channel light into higher gamma spectrums. All arenas are simply transitional channels of light energy. So all the arenas that this model represents, they're all channels of light energy. Light starts in the physical arena, and it circulates, and it bounces off, it refracts and reflects and moves around, and then we receive it through the sensual arena and on into the emotional arena, the conscious, the subconscious, the sixth sense, into the eternal arena. So the part of the purpose of the physical arena is literally to channel light into the higher spectrums, or into, if you will, the lower spectrums. Now, when you take a look at electromagnetic radiation on a spectrum from gamma rays to ultraviolet rays, you'll see that the physical colors and the colors that we see are pretty much smack dab in the middle, almost. And you'll see that there are frequencies on either side that we have learned to use and harness, and we've actually even been able to see ultraviolet light using special equipment, and and the idea behind all of the arenas is that they're just transitional channels. They're moving light energy from one place to another. Light energy is being produced in the physical arena. Some of it comes from the sun, and actually all of our light here in our physical arena comes from the sun, short of stars, which really don't impact us that much. And that light bounces around and is received through our eyes and through the sense that we use to visibly translate light into images in our minds and everything. But not just that light, the entire physical arena is made up of light particles, and we saw that with the understanding of quantum mechanics. And we talked about when God created the heavens and the earth, He did so with creating light first. And so we have all of these examples and all of this evidence that points to the fact that everything is light and everything is energy, everything is vibration. You've probably heard all of these kind of taglines along this line. And so the purpose of this physical arena, though, is to take that light and somehow get it into us and get all of those pieces of information. I mean, without a physical world, the information would be minimal. The lessons would be nil. We would not be able to translate all of these representations that we see in our physical world into something that gives us all of the ideas that we have and all of the excitations that we have, the hopes and the dreams and the visions and the expectations, along with the pain and the suffering and all of those type of things. We wouldn't have any of that if it wasn't for the light energy that is contained in all the mass that is the physical arena, and that exists here. So that's the purpose. That's the job of the physical arena, is to cultivate that light, create a tangible interpretation of it, and then channel it into the higher spectrums that we utilize all the way into our soul. Now, the location of this physical arena is pretty obvious. It's all around us. The physical arena is everything you can experience with your five senses, including when a Hubble telescope brings images back from space, or when divers bring up images and footage from the ocean's deep. It's the top to the bottom. It's everything. It's all the heavens and all the earth. It's all the creation. It's all the planets. And it's planets and universal creations that we've yet to discover and see. And it's all around us. It's just that's the location. You should be able to utilize the sense of the eyes to look around and see that the physical arena doesn't stop, and it's everywhere. It's encompassing, and like in our model, it's on the outer perimeter because it 100% impacts everything about us. So the tangible attributes of the physical arena, this is not all of them, but this gives you a very clear definition of it, is color and temperature and pressure and weight, density, state, like solids, liquids, and gases, texture, light, darkness, shade, shadow, sound, smells, gravity. All of these attributes are utilized in the physical arena. You probably in your own mind right now are naming off, and you should name off a few of the attributes that you're aware of in this physical arena. And just think about it. You know, what are some of the attributes I have not discussed here? Because, and when I say like smells, those smells are attributes of the physical arena until they're translated in through a person's sensual arena and utilized in his psyche or in his seven arena model. I guarantee you that whether you can smell it or not, that dump site stinks, and whether you can smell it or not, that cooking smells great. Whether you can smell it or not, and we kind of get back to that line of thinking about consciousness and whether or not a person is conscious one to another, and you can just kind of see that model idea reinforced. Well, sure, they're conscious, and we've already discussed that, but maybe they don't have the sense of smell. It just limits the flavor or the type of conscious that they are. It limits, or not even limits, because many people who are limited by a physical sense make up for it with other senses, and before you know it, they have a more keen awareness of life around them than the person with all five senses. So what they end up with is a change, distorted from the norm, but an altered conscience, or an altered view, or an altered personality as a result of that one thing that they aren't necessarily processing. But the physical arena around us always stays the same, and it always interfaces with the same 7 arena humans around it. Now, when I say it stays the same, I mean its attributes stay the same. We may create new things. We create spaceships. We create helicopters and airplanes and weaponry and atomic bombs. And interestingly enough, when we do this, we change the face of our physical arena, and we may add intensity to some of the attributes of the physical arena, but we all know that you can't remove mass and can't add mass to the Earth. It's always the same amount of mass. And then in so doing, we recognize that the physical arena is this. It has stability, and we'll see that in a bit. So with these attributes come limitations and boundaries of the physical arena. I mean, the physical arena is 100% visible. It doesn't hide. Sure, if it's dark, you can't see something, but that darkness is also part of the physical arena. And the physical arena is still intact. Just because we can't process it with a certain sense does not make it disappear. It is still 100% visible, or maybe a better word is 100% there, and hence not always visible to just the naked eye. It's not always a spiritual or sensual arena. It's physical. And so if something's going to physically hide, so what I'm trying to get at, in the physical arena, it's going to have to hide in plain view. In other words, with our conscience, thoughts come and go. And with our emotions, they rise and fall. With different aspects of our internal psyche and our subconscious, it changes and impacts different ways. And oftentimes we can be influenced inside our minds in ways that we don't understand, and in ways that we can't grab hold of and always fix without some specialized knowledge. However, the physical arena exists around us in such a way that if something is going to manipulate you or give you a help and help you be successful, it's going to have to do so in kind of a serendipitous way. It's going to have to hide in plain view. Now, you say, well, okay, what does that mean? We're going to see in a bit how things can hide in plain view in advertising, where certain shapes and ways of being presented, of people and things being presented or set up, tends to influence your mind in a certain way. Let me suggest that feng shui and the art of placement and how corners and softed corners and rounded corners can make you feel more confident, more comfortable, more successful, and all of the things that we know that feng shui contributes, and or that you can do purposely. If you've ever been inside of a prison, the coldness and the sterility of the floors and the bars and the walls, and it all lends itself to a psychological deprivation of being alive and having freedom. It is meant to make you feel like you are bound up and locked up and kept from something that is better. So that lightly is what I mean, and we'll dive more into that when we get into the actual Gestalt theory, but good for you to hear right now. Another limitation and boundary of the physical arena is that in order for information to travel from the physical arena to any other arena, it must somehow be translated, transmuted, or transposed by a trans device, which we find in the central arena. So that follows the same logic, but just brings out the point that there's nothing in this physical arena that can enter your body or your mind without going through the five senses. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what about demonic possession or angelic presence or some other form of an extra supernatural type of being? And I will refer you to the eternal arena, and we'll discuss those things then, because that's where they reside. And for them to materialize in the physical arena, they have to come from the eternal arena, as you saw how the arenas are connected. They have to come in through the back door, let's say. They are not elements of the physical arena. If they were and are to manifest themselves, it's a temporary situation when they do, and they are the eternal arena invading the physical arena, and only those two arenas have that conflict, which we will discuss more when we get to the eternal arena. But everything else has to be translated, transmuted, or transposed by a trans device in the central arena. So that means we somehow have to interact with it. I think to some degree this lends the argument towards the idea that manifestation of anything, which is a little bit of what maybe The Secret might have been about, and other ideologies. If you just simply concentrate and visualize and focus on something, that it's going to actually manifest itself. And that's dangerous thinking, and this logic here, this model, defies that, because you can't create that interaction without physically touching it and going there. And that idea of ask, seek, and knock, and all these things will be added unto you, and you'll be able to get what you want if you follow that formula. It's because there has to be there's a mental process, but then there also has to be a physical process and an interaction with the physical arena in order to get what you want. And if you are, taping up sayings and creating positive motivation and doing everything mentally in your mind, but you're not physically transmuting those ideas, then you're missing part of the formula and you're falling short of it. So this means that all communication between the physical arena and any other arena has to go through that central arena. It also shows you that you've got 5 gates and 5 gatekeepers that can determine what goes in to your 7-arena Pentagon framework. You can determine what it is that influences you. You can decide to get into the physical arena and educate yourself in a experiential way, in a religious way. You can decide to educate yourself in a formal way, and we talk about all of this in E of Education. But you can determine, based on the opportunity that exists in that physical world, you can determine what goes into you, and the result of what goes into you is what comes out. And we see that when we discussed when we recognize that light energy is coming into this physical arena. Everything that you pick up and learn and interact with your 5 senses is all light energy, and it's being utilized inside of you and going all the way to the eternal arena and then bouncing off and being utilized again. It's kind of like a turbo. If you understand a turbo in a car, it takes the exhaust and compresses it and re-injects it into the pistons and literally uses its own compression to increase compression. Hope I said that right, all you mechanics out there. But that's the best of my knowledge how it works, and that's a lot of how this RF this energy, this light energy works. And so we create this limitation in the fact that the physical arena has no way of entering you or impacting you without your five senses allowing it to. Now, you say, well, wait a second. I had the physical arena impact me at an age where I was not in control of my five senses, or I was not in control of my physical arena or my physical environment, and that environment was nasty, and that environment impacted me. And now it's stuck in my subconscious. I want you to keep that thought in mind as we move forward, because when we get to the subconscious arena, by identifying these boundaries and attributes and things of that nature in the subconscious arena, I'm going to show you how you can get rid of those deep-seated things that are going to cause you problems in your everyday life. But understand that every day that you move through the physical arena, you are deciding what goes into each of those five different senses through that central arena. And there's no way around this. This limitation is a safeguard for us against, number one, spiritual beings directly influencing our higher planes without our permission. So those spiritual beings that have left the eternal arena and been interjected into the physical arena cannot come trouncing directly into our psyche. They cannot invade our space or influence us in some way unless they go through our central arena. And then we have to give them permission to go through our central arena. And it's this point between the physical arena and the central arena that free will is executed. We'll see that more in the next arena. In essence, the central arena is what frames our free will by allowing us to regulate what it enters into our minds from the physical arena. So there is boundaries. The physical arena is there. It's set as a stage. How we interact with that physical arena and on that stage is what determines the impact of our performance. It's what the audience, it's what those around us take into their own lives as part of the physical arena. How we interact with that physical arena and the light energy that we are producing as a result of our spirit and our personality and our frame of reference and our reality contributes back into that physical arena. And our free will dictates how we are going to allow the existing physical arena and all of its dynamics to determine what contributes to our contribution back into that physical arena. But without this path and this pathway, the physical arena is limited to just simply being there and existing as if being the stage or the arena as we have described it. This is for the most part what defies the argument behind objects also moving psychokinetically, aka telekinesis. Telepathy and the ability for people to pass thoughts back and forth very much exists. Now, I'm not trying to be an authority on it. I believe it exists, and I believe my model substantiates that belief. I believe that many experiments and many eyewitness accounts of that kind of stuff happening exists. And my model will support that concept. But because the physical arena has no connection to us except through our five senses, and none of those senses are active. They're all passive senses. It stands to reason that telekinesis is not a possibility. The only other way for the physical arena to be directly affected is from the other end. So, for me to sit here and concentrate on a deck of cards and then with my mind flip one of those cards over, or concentrate on a cup and move that cup, or concentrate on the doors that are on my VCR and physically move those doors, is not going to happen. It is not feasibly possible. And in our model, because the next arena, the very next arena that comes into play here is our central arena, we don't have any active components in our sensual arena. I can't smell something into existence. I can't hear something into existence or into a physical movement. So there is this boundary that exists between that physical arena and any of the other arenas. However, from the other end, the eternal arena, the physical arena can be accessed and can be affected. Therefore, if you see someone telepathically move an object in your presence, if you're in some kind of a seance or some kind of a college dorm, I can see this happening in, and somebody is trying to do some sort of a telekinesis demonstration, and they are physically able to move something with their mind, move it from one place to another, affect that physical environment that way. That is not on a cellular level. I will tell you that through visualization, people have been able to make themselves bleed. That is on a cellular level. That is contained within the systems of the human body. And that's a different concept. That's not considered, that is not telekinesis. Telekinesis is moving an external object from you without physically interacting with it. And if they are telepathically moving something, then it stands to reason that they have summoned supernatural powers in incredibly high places out of the eternal arena. And there is pathways into the eternal arena, both good and bad, and we'll discuss those when we get to the eternal arena. But if somebody is telekinetically moving something, either it's a very good trick, which many people have the ability to create such falsehood, and oftentimes we will go to a magic show just for the intent of having an illusion presented before us, because it's a momentary escape from reality. All well and good. But if somebody truly is moving something, or something moves without any sort of effort helping it, then it was something from the other side, the spiritual side, that from the eternal arena, that intervened. And the idea of angels being there to help out. And I have multiple stories of angels interacting in my physical arena. And I can get into those at a later date. But when I've also seen the evil side of the eternal arena interact in my physical arena. It is not something you're going to see on a regular basis, and most people will not ever see it. Why do I say all that? Because I don't want you to lie in bed at night afraid the ceiling fan's going to attack you. I don't want you to think that, number one, I don't want you to waste all your time thinking that if you could learn to use your mind, you could maybe somehow control something. I don't know. I don't want you to be afraid the government's gonna find a way to mind control your physical being. We are starting to see some pretty amazing electronic devices that actually allow mind control to happen as a result of capturing the electrical impulses or the radiation that emits from our minds whenever we are thinking along a certain lines, and then we transmute that and transfer that knowledge, that signal, into an electronic signal, and then we're able to turn it into some sort of a mechanical, through a mechanical servo, some sort of a mechanical output. But that all has a connection. My point is, there's such a boundary in the physical arena that we can't break that connection ourselves. The only way that a connection can be altered is through the eternal arena. And if you recall the scriptural story of Jacob's ladder, and he saw angels ascending and descending, you might want to fix that in your mind, is that there's a ladder between the eternal and the physical world, and that those beings from the eternal world can find their way into the physical arena. But we're not going to do it vice versa, and we're not going to be able to affect the physical arena without a hands-on interaction and somehow through the five senses, either by touching it or by blowing on it or some other aspect of a physical force, using the laws of physics, we're not going to be able to get into that arena. And this becomes very valuable down the road when you start to mentally establish in your mind, that's right, all of the material things that I have around me are part of the physical world. And I'm no different than you. I struggle with trying to find financial success and trying to find to acquire the things that I want for my family and I and we all have a monetary struggle. We all have a struggle with trying to acquire goods in this life. The Bible says money answereth all things, and that is a proverb that does not go unnoticed. Without money, boy, you can't get much of anything done. And with money, you can be either very helpful or very hurtful. And so I don't want you to, first of all, look at the material things in your life and think that they somehow add to who you are and add to your stature. They may add to some influence that you can have, but they are not what you are and who you are, because they, at the same time, are bound to that physical arena. It's why they stay here when you go on into the grave. It's because they don't have access. They're not going to be moving into that eternal arena. They have the boundaries of the physical arena that they are stuck within. We'll touch more on that after a bit, but just some ways to apply it there. So what are the character traits of the physical arena and our model's representation? And this kind of gets interesting. The physical arena is represented by a pentagon in the color of violet. Now, the color violet is, I think it's applicable for the physical arena just because there is a vibrancy and a mystery and a whole lot of other attributes of the color violet itself, that seem to emit from the physical arena. Violet is used to represent royalty, but royalty is part of the physical arena. It really is a indicator of superiority in the physical arena. And so violet is a great representation for this arena. It's also the highest frequency with the shortest wavelength in the color spectrum as we see it in the rainbows. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. The whole Roy G. Biv plays out in our model, and violet has the highest frequency. Now, this right here is core to understanding the strategy. Let's begin by taking a look at this color violet. Its wavelength is roughly 380 to 450 nanometers, and it oscillates at roughly 668 to 789 terahertz. It is an incredibly high frequency. It is a frequency that is higher than your cell phone frequency. It is the frequency that does not get passed through an item that is violet, but rather the light gets reflected. So when you see something that's violet, it means that the light that's hitting it is all being absorbed except for the frequency range between 668 and 789. Now, these frequency ranges of the rainbow are not exact. You'll find different references to these frequency ranges. As you can see there, I have gigahertz on the screen, and it's actually a terahertz, which is a substantially higher frequency than gigahertz. That is a frequency that is just jamming. That is that is 1 trillion cycles per second is a terahertz. So 668 trillion cycles per second is what the color violet roughly is operating at. And that means if you are 668 trillion cycles per second. I don't know what the latest chip in our computers is turning and burning at. I think it's around. Computer chips are right today are roughly what 2-3 gigahertz. We have developed dual and quad core circuit boards that take advantage of stacking these so that we can get a greater output from them, but they're running at frequencies, about 3 gigahertz. This color purple, it oscillates at 668 terahertz. There's just no comparison, and it's like a wave compared to a teaspoon. If you want to look at it in that perspective. And I tell you that because I want you to recognize that color, we know color has an emotional charge to it, and there's a lot of psychology behind why that is. But part of it has to do with color is coming in to your mind at such an incredibly high frequency. If it's cycling one bit of data 668 trillion times every second, a consistent frequency, and think about all the colors that you see and all of the physical items in the physical world that come in through your eyes. You are processing a lot of frequency very fast. Do you ever go into a room or some sort of an environment where the colors are incredibly bright and maybe flashy and shiny? One of the reasons a discotheque, that's aging me, or a nightclub uses an impact of lights is because of that. It increases your the frequencies that you're taking in, and it gives you an energy and gives you an excitation that allows you to feel pumped up. I used to try to eat Donkey Kong cereal. It's got the brightest colors of any cereal I've ever seen. And I would attempt to eat it and literally be sick to my stomach by the time I got done. Not because of the taste, because that's why I ate it. It was so sugary good. It was the colors were so bright that by looking at them in my bowl, by the time I got done, I felt seasick. And we get around color. And it really has a great impact on us. But at the same time, it can have a positive impact by creating relaxation and soothing us simply because we tone down the frequency that we are accustomed to. Now, I'm breaking off into something that I wasn't anticipating, but let me just throw this out there, because it has positive influence on you if you want to utilize it. But understanding that our physical world oscillates at an incredibly high frequency, and since everything is colored, even black and white is a color, and it's going to have its own frequency. Everything has color, so everything that is taken in by your eyes is taken in at the point of entry at several trillion times per second data processing. That's the frequency. To give you a perspective on this real quick, your brain oscillates somewhere between your mental brain waves have been measured between 1 and 12 cycles per second. Okay, that's incredibly slow. That's like the difference between an armadillo trying to cross a highway and an F-14 going Mach 4, Mach 6, whatever they can do across the sky, and passing that same distance of a highway, crossing of a highway. It's a substantially high frequency that you are bringing your information in at. Well, if in our natural world there is going to be a standard wavelength of color, and it's going to be dominated by the blue sky and then whatever your lower surroundings are, but we all have a blue frequency, and we'll get to blue when we get to the emotional arena, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the range is specifically. It's still in the terahertz, but that blue frequency, is very close to the medium and the center of the rainbow, and it's a frequency that, like I said, dominates all of us and unifies all of us. So it gives us a kind of a standby frequency or a carrier frequency that we all operate on in general. And from that carrier frequency, we can excite an environment with brighter colors because they increase the frequency and the vibrance and the luminosity and other aspects of color in our minds and give us that rush. Or we can tone down those colors and add some passive mixture to them that doesn't drop it into some range that is so low that that we're not able to see it, but it just has to move it from the norm, from the standard, enough to where when it gets processed inside of us all the way through, that the relationship between what our mind is processing at with a bright color and the relationship to what our mind processes at with a darker, more subtle color is substantial enough inside of us to change our physical state. Okay, so if ultraviolet, and this is our physical world, it's coming at us 688 trillion times a second, and we're processing all of that with our 5 different senses. We are very much at the edge of our senses. We are very much busy and very much alert and very much dialed in. But when that signal comes into the arenas and we start to synthesize it, it starts to slow down, and we're going to see that as we move into the arenas. And it slows down to somewhere between a range of 1 and 12 cycles per second. So that's an incredibly slow process compared to what it comes in at. So if we can just adjust the external frequencies a little bit, we can substantially affect the percentage of cycles per second inside of us, and it will be notably a notable difference. And this is one of the powerful awarenesses that you get out of this model, because you start to understand the ratio between your internalization and the physical world around you. And then when you look at feng shui, or when you look at color therapy, or when you just consider your environment, you start to recognize how it's impacting you on the inside. And if you live in a house that's very cluttered and very dirty, later when we talk about art and line and how some of the sharp edges and corners and some feng shui principles come into play, you'll see how that can disrupt your spirit, and you'll understand why. Because it's changing the frequency at which things are coming in. It's also changing the rhythm at which they come in. We'll talk about that more later. So if you are in an environment where it's very bright and very energetic, and if you're somebody who's commonly depressed but you stay inside a lot, you need to increase your saturation of brighter colors and livelier environments physically, in the physical arena, and it will, through saturation, naturally matriculate into changing into happiness and joy and exuberance on the inside. And you say, you're telling me just by being in a happy environment I'm going to be all happy? No, you may not be all happy, but it will take the edge off. And in this life, it's all about that 2%. It's all about that edge. It's all about that little bit of extra effort that you put into something that makes you successful or not. It's all about not putting in 2%, and that's the difference between the norm and failure. And so when you can find an environment that changes in frequency according to what you need, and we'll chart all this out later so you can have a little better idea, but when you do that, you are able to control your internal frequencies from an external viewpoint. And by doing that, you can literally change habits and demeanor, and then, of course, all of the repercussive elements that come from having changed that demeanor. If you were always depressed and you found yourself more often in a happy environment, and this could be as simple as at work, just instead of having your cubicle like it is, brighten it up a little bit. Now, obviously, you don't want to go and paint it some neon color that is absolutely distracting, but there are ways that you could change that environment to where at least the subliminal thoughts that are being transmuted from the physical arena into your arena will start to resonate at a better frequency and a more applicable frequency. Now, if you're somebody who is naturally mellow and your cycles per second internally are on the lower end of that spectrum, you may not benefit from a more vibrant physical arena presentation, because it may actually drive your internal rhythms to be at a higher end of the spectrum that do not make you feel comfortable. They do not fit your frame of reference. Now, you could learn and you could go through a process that would get you there if that's what you so desired, but what we want to do is be optimally tuned internally and externally so that our physical arena, for the most part, the 80-20 rule, if you eat right 80% of the time, it really doesn't matter what you eat the other 20% of the time, to some degree. You can't eat arsenic 20% of the time, but in general, if 80% of the time your influence is very much in line with your rhythms and with your internal frequency, then you're going to find that you can better manage the toxicity of the 20%. That 20% won't influence you as much. If 80% of the time you're around the kind of people that promote your way of thinking, financially and spiritually and emotionally, etc., then you're going to find that when you're around the other 20% that may be toxic to your frame of reference, whether they be too jovial or too mellow or too rich or whatever, that they won't influence your internal rhythms. You'll have enough defensive mechanisms to counterbalance that. And you'll discover that by understanding this arena and these character traits in the physical arena, you'll understand better how its limitations and your internal limitations and the coupling between them can actually benefit. Now, we already know much about the physical arena, and I'm not going to sit here and completely dissect it, but we have already, as a species, humanity has dissected it using the natural science, such as physics, oceanography, astronomy, material science, biology, chemistry, etc. And so we have a very good idea of how it works. If you look at my graphic there in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see this representation, as poorly as my graphic design is, you'll see this representation of a higher frequency in the outer band of our model. And as it moves towards the eternal arena, the wavelengths get further apart, and they begin and actually I show a smaller amplitude as it gets closer to that spiritual arena as well, which we can talk about later. But the frequencies that are coming in at you from that physical arena are incredibly high. They're fast, and they are of a higher amplitude, and as they process through us, they start to slow down in frequency, and they also minimize or deteriorate. So the amplitude and the frequency are both affected. If you were to take a garden hose and wrap it in this same formation, twist it like or fold it up like a snake, and then grab one end of it and pull it straight, and do that till it is about a third of the way stretched out. The area where you had pulled from, the first few feet of that garden hose, would be the straightest, and if you had it folded up in such a way that it was like a fireman's hose, top to bottom, left to right, looking like a frequency wave as we've displayed here, the part that you were pulling on would be the straightest, and as it got closer to the part that was all folded up, that would be the more dramatic and the higher frequency. We will represent this in another video using a whiteboard so that I can make it very clear to you what we're talking about on the whole frequency thing. And as you saw in the previous slide of the spectrum, you saw how that particular wavelength was changing size and shape, and for it to change amplitude, it's just how high from 0, which is the middle of it, how high those little peaks and valleys go. So the reason for even talking about that aspect of the physical arena is so that you understand one main point, and that is that the physical arena oscillates at a very high frequency with lots of data, because it's all being visually represented, and it's all being also kinesthetically represented in that it's mass, it has form and shape, it has color, and it comes into our central arena at incredibly high wavelengths. This is partially why it's more difficult to program your mind from the physical arena, the external, without tapping your subconscious. And we'll definitely see that when we look at the subconscious arena, because that's where we're able to slow down this signal and get it on a wavelength that magnifies what it is that you're programming it with. So that being said, let's take a look at the personality of the physical arena. Okay, so we know a lot about the physical arena. As I mentioned, the sciences, the natural sciences, have educated us as a society what the physical arena is all about, how it interacts with itself, and things of this nature. But the physical arena has a personality, as does every arena. And by kind of recognizing the personality, I truly am trying to shift your focus and your way of interacting with each of these arenas from one of a clinical perspective to one of a relational perspective. I want you to truly know the physical arena as if it was another individual. And to know the other arenas in such a way helps define them. It helps to make them real, and it helps when it comes to interacting with them, because when we start to meditate and move towards taking these arenas in such a direction of intangibility and visualization and mental processing, you're going to want to be able to interact with these arenas, or at least the concept of these arenas, in a very real and functional way. And the best way I know to get that across is through utilizing some of the aspects of our own persona that we would be able to recognize and know how to interact with. So we bring out the personality. And you'll find also that when you see the personality of an arena, you know how to interact with it. For example, the physical arena is bipolar. Literally. There's a north and a south pole. Now, if you did not know this north and south pole philosophy, and you didn't know the world was round, then you would be interacting with your physical arena much the way they did when they thought the world was flat. It would become much more frightening to you and less moldable, less adaptable for you. So by literally knowing that the world is bipolar, that gives you an ability to relate to it with much more confidence. But when it comes to the personality, the physical arena truly is bipolar. And again, these arenas are not, it's not the actual physical items in the world and the world itself and everything else. It's the arena in which they all live in. And the arenas, all of these arenas are purely theoretical. This is just part of the thinking strategy. So I'm telling you the personality of the arena itself. But we also know that the items that are in that arena take on the personality of the arena. Okay? And our physical arena is bipolar. It has a lively personality, very lively. But you'll see the bipolar here in a second. It's always changing, but it always stays the same. Now, let's back up. The physical arena has a lively personality, but at the same time, it's very docile. I mean, the liveliness of it is that it has a circle of life that never ends. It has very exciting parts of it. It's constantly moving because within it, the objects are always moving, whether it's the Earth turning or the full rotation of the Earth around the Sun, or whether it's the objects on the Earth, people and vehicles, dogs and cats, and the wind and everything else that contributes. This arena is a lively arena. But have you not ever found yourself in a place where it's just absolutely serene? The redwood forest and the forest up in Northern California. Sometimes you go up into the Muir Woods, and you find yourself sitting at the base of some of these amazing trees, and they reach up into the sky hundreds of feet. You can't even see the tops of them. The base you can't get your arms around. You couldn't if you had 6 people trying. They're just absolutely mammoth in size, and you can sit there on a still, cool day, and it seems like nothing is moving. And you are absolutely in a very mellow place. And here we live in a lively arena, yet there are pockets of calmness, of stillness. And since this arena includes outer space, just imagine halfway between here and the moon. I have some amazing photographs of various individuals in space. Right here is a picture of an astronaut up in a space capsule, and notice he's wearing a Project Challenge t-shirt, the Arizona National Guard School for Boys. It just closed here in Arizona. He was sporting a t-shirt up there in space in support of that program. But imagine this place right here is incredibly quiet, and it's incredibly still. Yet we say the physical arena has a lively personality. Well, sure it does. But there are places and pockets within that physical arena that are incredibly chill. And why would that matter? Well, because when we start moving into accessing big ideas and how to utilize this entire program to gain better control of mental health and success principles and various other things, you need to just recognize that the physical arena is not always crazy. It's not always traffic jams and Monday morning mania. But rather, you can, find places in the physical arena that have slowed down and are on the bipolar side of this lively personality that the physical arena has, with all of the chemistry and all of the biology and all of the interaction that goes on in the physical arena. It can get crazy with such a high frequency of everything that's coming into your central arena. And then if you add to it Manic Monday, and if you add to it rush hour traffic, or you add to it exciting times, and if you maintain that threshold, you're gonna find out that you'll burn out in this physical arena area. And when it comes to meditation and prayer and thinking and contemplating, you need to be able to recognize that the environment you're in is resonating at a certain frequency. You don't have to know what that frequency is. You just have to recognize that there's a lot going on. For example, I sit here in my living room, and we have a relatively dark, large wooden entertainment center and some dark coffee tables, and the couch is a very natural green. My drapes are a green and a very soft off-white. The lights are relatively low. We keep low wattage bulbs except for the kitchen, because when I'm cooking I want to see. But we have plants throughout the place. Our over the dining table is very soft lighting. And I do this because I personally consider my home a refuge. It is an aspect of the physical arena that I have control of, and I want to make it so that when I get here, I am comfortable and relaxed and I can enjoy my children, which are incredibly high energy people, and our lives are always going 100 miles an hour. So I like the environment to be relatively sedated in the place where I live. Now, that isn't always the case, especially a younger person per se, or whatever the case may be, may have a house that's very high energy, big windows, lots of postmodern furniture, if you will, and a lot of edges and a lot of bright colors, because that fits them, especially at that time. And that may change throughout their lives. But that being said, I want you to recognize that the physical arena that you build around you is going to greatly dictate how lively or how sedated you are taking in that information on a regular basis, and you need to adapt it to be what you need at the times when you need it. And I believe there is benefit in both physical arenas when it comes to thinking and putting yourself in a place to think. Because there are times, depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your mind and with your idea, that the environment you're in would actually stimulate and move you towards that idea. Now, when we talk about the sixth sense and the full Eigestalt strategy, this'll make a whole lot more sense, because you would physically actually want to put yourself in a place that would help you stimulate the a resultant of the idea that you're after. I don't even think that's good grammar. But at the same time, and we'll find out when we talk about rods of knowledge, that as you're building your rods of knowledge, you may actually want a dissonant rod of knowledge. So you've got everything lined up that's aiming towards, let's say you're trying to design a new vehicle, a new car. Let's bring it down. Let's say you're the steering wheel designer of a car company, and steering wheels are very mundane. I mean, they're round and they have some basic attributes, and your job is to design a steering wheel that creates a new kind of stimulation at a kinesthetic level for the race car driver, for a new sports car that's coming out. And so you're working with your rods of knowledge to put yourself in a position to have all the, and again, these are advanced concepts, but I like to seed the ground here a little. You're doing all of this. You're building all your rods of knowledge, and you're trying to get to where you want to put a thrill in the hands of somebody that's driving this race car. And everything that you are setting up in order to come up with this idea is all high energy. Maybe you purposely listen to high energy music, and you get some high energy kinesthetic things around you. Maybe you're holding onto a piece of leather even while you think. Just you've built up all the different rods of knowledge that make sense while you're trying to come up with this idea. But you recognize that you need some sort of dissonance in the equation, so that the result between the dissonance and your ideal perception can produce this third element that very well may be the key to coming up with what this new steering wheel is going to look like. So one of the arenas that you can alter is your physical arena. And so you may take all of these high stimuluses and bring them together as you're allowing the Eigestalt strategy to find and access that idea that's going to give you the new steering wheel. And you may say, you know what? I need a backdrop. I need an environment that's going to put a twist on my thinking process so that I can access an idea that is not currently being used by anybody. And so maybe what you do is you take all that high energy stimulation in the rods of knowledge, and you sit in 4 or 5 different arena aspects, different physical arenas that stimulate your idea in a way that's antithesis to what you're after. So if you're after a fast sports car steering wheel, you may turn around and sit somewhere at the beach quietly and try to let the dissonance of the relaxed beach influence the rods of knowledge that are pushing for a very racy type of solution. Or you may take and actually go to a church and sit, and maybe even sit near the bells as the bells ring, and try to use that and utilize that environment to stimulate the way you're going to come up with your idea. Or you take and you go out into the forest, or you find yourself in the desert. Maybe you get on an airplane and purposely go up in the sky just to meditate on that idea in such a quiet territory. Or you put on a pair of noise-canceling headphones and you shut out the world with dark sunglasses. Or maybe you put on some rose-colored sunglasses and you take a stroll down a very quiet street. All of these backdrops change the way you access a particular idea. But if you don't recognize that the physical arena has this personality where it's lively and it's mellow, you won't be able to in your mind go, okay, I need to be right here in this spectrum, and I'm going to utilize this backdrop to a particular end. So knowing the personality, this bipolar personality of the physical arena, and its liveliness to the extreme that it has a melodramatic or a mellow aspect to it as well, if you don't know that, then you're going to find yourself just shooting in the dark. But it gives you some direction. All right, let's move on. It's always changing, yet it stays the same. Now, this is kind of the same, basically a subpoint to that initial one. It's always changing. Animals are dying. They're falling on the ground. They're turning into fertilizer. They're fertilizing the forest, and I'm talking wild animals, not like your cat or dog. And then that forest takes those nutrients, and it grows up a new tree, and that tree drops a seed, and it's always changing. Forest fire happens, the forest gets wiped out, it rebuilds, the ocean is coming in and taking eroding the physical beach there, the beachhead, or rivers are flowing into lakes, and the lakes rising and then falling, and it's always changing. Yet at the same time, it always stays the same. The natural sciences, we would never have been able to come to the conclusions that we have and develop the sciences that we have developed if it wasn't for the fact that the Earth stays the same in many aspects. The laws of physics do not change. They remain the same. There are many other aspects of the world that doesn't change. Seasons, yes, they themselves are changing. Yet we still know what they are. We can identify summer, winter, spring, and fall. It's not like one year we go, oh, this year we had Balabooba. I don't know, I made a word up. And what was that? Oh, it was a season we've never seen before. We know nothing about it, and it never made any sense. Now, sure, we've had the reversal of seasons, and El Niños and El Niñas, and La Papas, and Sombreros, and and the Fiestas, and just kidding. Those different aspects of the seasons where they've changed the time in which they roll in or whatever. But it's not like all of a sudden the whole world turns purple and we're like, oh, what season is this? There's a consistency to the physical arena. But yet it's also has constant changes. Well, and I don't mean to apply with every little bullet point, but this again makes a difference in your psyche. For you to recognize that your physical arena has both of these things going on can allow you in the workplace to identify what are those things that stay the same and what are those things that change. Why? Because when the things that are supposed to stay the same change, that really can mess with you. But when those things are predetermined to be changeable, you may say, hey, I'm always going to have the same boss. Yet all of a sudden something happens and he gets transferred to another department and you've got a new boss. Instead of you being reactionary, oh, what happened here? Now I've got to deal with this new person. you already had the mindset that it was potentially going to change. Yet things still stay the same. For you to recognize that your company is always going to be developing widgets A, B, and C, and the goal of the company is to do nothing more than develop those A, B, and C widgets, but better, faster, smarter, and stronger every year. Well, it may keep you from running off and trying to develop a widget D and shove it through the marketing department or try to run it up the chain, and before you know it, you waste a lot of time, effort, and energy. There's a million ways to apply it, but to recognize it is the beginning step. But also to recognize this change of our physical arena and then how it always stays the same can drill right down personally, and when you go to meditate, to know that you want to get into a place of less lively personality. You want to get into a more mellow place. But then you also want to get into a place that's not going to change. I wouldn't suggest you meditate in the middle of a freeway, for example, because of the changes that could happen. And you say, well, that's kind of ridiculous. But when you start thinking on these levels and recognizing that your physical arena is that malleable, that controllable, all of a sudden it empowers you, because you're no longer just kind of floating through in a reactionary mode. You're very much in control and wanting to control every aspect of your surroundings, or at least where you're putting yourself in such a way. All right, move on. Soft and sweet on one hand, yet because of its bipolar nature, it's also subtle and ingenious. It exudes a hard edge with a soft, genuine touch. And we see that all throughout nature. We see that. You look at a badger that'll rip you apart, but his fur is nice and soft. Or a sea otter has this beautiful exterior, but I guarantee you, if you trapped one and tried to hold on to it, you'd discover the hard edge with which it can wield its teeth and its claws and other things. It's soft and sweet and subtle and ingenious. The physical arena is so complementary of itself, and the way it all fits together is just absolutely brilliant. This is an aspect of the physical arena. You know, if the physical arena can affect you, and through feng shui and other aspects of vibration analysis, we come to the conclusion that being in a certain environment can change the way you emotionally respond and these other things. What if you were to put yourself in an ingenious environment? Put yourself in a financially successful environment. And of course, since we're talking, these are outputs of humankind, well, that means that you're going to go to seminars. And you're going to and you say, well, why should I go to that seminar? Well, you go to that seminar because you're trying to change your physical arena. You're trying to change the aspect of that arena, or put yourself in an aspect of that arena where there are positive influences towards your goal, or towards the idea that you want to create. And so to understand that it has lively areas and mellow areas, it changes, yet it's always also the same. These little aspects, it's soft and sweet and subtle and ingenious, yet it exudes a hard edge, but it's got this soft touch, and you start looking at your physical arena in a whole different way, in such a way that you start to discover that there are manageable attributes to it, and this personality starts to come forth, and you're like, wow, I'm interacting with my world. It's not just flying by. I'm consciously engaging, to use a overused term here. It's passive yet aggressive. I'm telling you, the wind can just be there. It could just be wonderful little breeze, or it could get kicked up so hard that it blows your house away. This is a bipolar nature of this physical arena. It's evolutionary, yet it was created. The world was created, yet there are microevolutionary processes that go on, and ways that animals migrate And when different species or plants are introduced to a new environment, that environment adapts. So there's this adaptability that we see. It's adaptive yet settled. The Earth is what it is. It doesn't change every time we look at it from outer space. But at the same time, it adapts. Forest fires and floods and the way the cycle of life goes and everything else, there's this adaptability. It's got, at the same time, a North Pole that it has a South Pole. It's got an East and it's got a West. It's got a hot and it's got a cold. It's got a wet and it's got a dry. I live in Arizona. We see that kind of bipolar persona on a regular basis. It could be 110 degrees in the daytime out in the desert here, and at night it can drop down to 40 degrees if you're in the right place at the right time of year. And and you get this incredible fluctuation, but that's the way our physical arena is. It has pockets of extremes, and you got to recognize those extremes and identify them so you know how to navigate between them. It's monstrously huge. At the same time, it's microscopic. I mean, we're talking about quantum theory and quantum physics. These are microscopic levels. Yet you build up enough of those, and you could have a gargantuan, monstrous building or aircraft or some explosion. The physical arena has both of those dynamics happening at the same time, hence making it a deadly arena as well as a nurturing arena. You say, oh, yes, that makes sense, but why do I care? Well, I think that's pretty obvious. You want to put yourself in areas that are nurturing. You don't want to be in a deadly arena. Quite often, and I won't say the different reasons why, but I recognize the threats, and I have young children that I worry about on a regular basis, and the bigger they get, the less the more comfortable I am with the fact that they have to walk out to the car sometimes, and come back without me, and in such a short time. Something could happen. It's a harsh world. It's a deadly world. And God forbid, and that's probably the prayer I pray the most, is keep them safe. Fortunately, I have a 19-year-old son that is 240 bench presses, 300 pounds, and is just absolutely good to go at taking care of himself. And I feed my other kids a lot of milk and and eggs and stuff. And hurry up, get big enough to take care of you, to make sure. No, I'm just kidding. But I worry about them being so small because I understand the deadliness. So I don't put our family in situations where this physical arena can be deadly to them. I gotta find arenas that are nurturing, and we're always going to museums, and we play Rich Dad Poor Dad cash flow game with my 7-year-old. He talks liabilities and assets like it was Mario Brothers or something, and it's actually quite comical. And we put them in environments of books and a scripture reading, and we play music for them that we think will nurture them and not be poisonous to them in one way or another. I take Caleb to the gym every now and then and let him experience a little bit of exercise. He's still developing. We're not going to overly push him. We take him swimming. These are changing. We are purposely changing our physical arena so that we can get the benefits from them. And we all do this. You do this, but you don't recognize that it's actually something that you do. You go to church. Church environment should be a church environment. It ought to bring your soul to a place of rest and quiet so that you can hear the still small voice of God. I mean, that's the reason you went. It ought to be a place of encouragement and a place that you can gain strength from, somewhat on a temporal level, so you can make it through the next week to get on with getting on, but also on an eternal level in such a way that it influences your conscience and influences your moral judgment and influences decisions that are higher than your daily routine. In all of these different physical arenas that we're putting ourselves in, we're recognizing the personality of this overall physical arena. It's unpredictable as well as it is predictable. We were talking about seasons. You can pretty much predict, especially in Arizona, when summer's going to hit. But on an even smaller level, we know what time the sun's going to rise because it's very predictable. But what we can't predict is when the next rainstorm is going to wipe out a small village, when the next tornado or the next earthquake is going to rock our world, because of the bipolar nature of this physical arena. But its personality is such that you don't want to mess with it. When you have something that is that powerful and it's that bipolar, it's very unpredictable. And so you're going to want to identify what about my physical arena is predictable, and then what of it is unpredictable. And you know what? In so doing, these become triggers and keys later to accessing a big idea, because you can literally plan to put yourself in an arena where an unpredictable situation is happening, and the result of that unpredictable situation is that your mind is moved, the rods of knowledge are affected in a way that you get a gestalt in the sixth sense towards an idea that you otherwise would not have had. Now, we live in the information age. If I want to put myself in an arena of a storm, and I live in Arizona, and I want to be in the middle of a hurricane so that I can have that stimulation playing while I'm trying to access a certain idea, and I believe that it would have some sort of benefit to my pursuit of that idea, well, I can dial up an internet page, put on my my nice Beats Dr. Dre headphones, studio headphones that really bring the sound in and kind of noise cancel the rest of the world out, and I can literally get a big screen and close off all the lights and give myself a simulation of a storm. And that's very beneficial in the ability to access an idea that you otherwise could, because you're taking the physical arena and you're manipulating it, and you're manipulating the other arenas that we are going to discuss in such a way that you're able to build a rod of knowledge real quickly to draw you to accessing an idea in a place in the sixth sense where you otherwise would not have been able to get to. This all may sound like crazy, right? Like we're trying to think without using our brain. We're trying to just kind of kinesthetically come up with a solution. But the reality is that we do that on a regular basis. Quite often. Have you ever cooked? I don't cook with recipes. When I look at a recipe on the internet, it's to get a foundational starting point. But I'm not a recipe guy. I will not sit there and mete out 2 tablespoons of this and a quart of that. The only time I follow a recipe is when I buy it off the shelf in a box and I have to mix it according to their instructions so that when I nuke it and pull it out, it's going to come out exactly as it should be. Then I'll use the recipe. But if it's not on a box, I like to cook kinesthetically. I like to cook in such a way that I am recognizing the smell and tasting it as I go, and oftentimes my cooking will change based on the appeal or the audience that I'm cooking for, or the time of the year that it is. Vegetable soup could take on 3 or 4 different more than 3 or 4. I can think of 30 or 40, because there are times where I'll cook a vegetable soup with very small vegetables, tightly cut. Other times I want it to be big and chunky and robust. It all depends upon the emotion that I want to draw through that bowl of vegetable soup. If you always cook your food the same way every time, you're missing out on the ability to take advantage of the personality of this physical arena and recognize that it's going to influence the next level, the sensual and the emotional level as that food is taken in. And boy, I love soul food, and I love good country cooking, because it captures a lot of these ideas that I'm talking about. So by recognizing that the physical arena has a personality, and what a personality it is, and how exciting it is to get to know your physical arena in this way, it starts to mold and shape the way you interact with it. I sit down to a meal, there's 2 bites that I care about. It's the first bite and the last bite. Everything else in between, just like I talk about the bipolar nature of this physical arena, everything else in between has a place during my orchestrating of consuming that plate of food. I sit down to a plate of food, I don't know, let's say a steak and potato and vegetable, knowing there's a dessert coming. And my first bite is going to be the best bite I can muster at that time. And then once I take that bite and I enjoy what this meal, I mean, that is the sing bite of the meal. That's the one that it was supposed to taste like. And then as I process myself through the meal, everything else finds its place. And I look for best bites on my plate. I look for combinations that will stimulate me according to the process and the path that I'm taking in this journey. The meal was created. I could smell the meal. I became emotionally engaged with the meal as it was presented. And then I take that bite that represents the meal. And everything that I believe the chef or myself or whatever the case may be, even if it came out of a box, intended. And I take that bite and I take it in, and then I start to build upon it. It's either going to be the best bite of the meal, or it's just simply going to be the starting point so that I can find the best bite. But oftentimes when I do that, it is the best bite. And then I process through the meal, and I always end up with another best bite. The best bite that I could work towards as my last bite. And, it rings so true. And when I finish a meal like that, and it resonates from first bite to last bite, the final swallow of the milk or the Dr. Pepper or whatever the case may be, I am ecstatic. I recognize that I have consumed a part of the physical arena that just perfectly resonated inside of me, and my frequencies are all lined up, and I'm absolutely giddy. And don't tell me you don't do this. In some countries, when they get that way, they smash the plates on the floor and they sing and get all excited because that resonates. That frequency comes across, and it really sets you in a wonderful place. But when I eat that meal, it's because I take a look at both poles, both aspects of that physical thing, and I try to bring them together. Music is the same way. We used to always say when we played music together was that as long as the first note and the last note are on key, everything else in the middle doesn't matter. You can run off over here and climb this mountain and fall down this well and run down this trail. Those are metaphoric ways of speaking of music and runs and lines and whatnot. But as long as we all end on a and we have the same sound when we finish, it doesn't matter where we went through that whole process. If you ever listen to Fish or any fusion type of music or jazz, you'll recognize that principle where you can just completely break down the melodies and take it away from the foundational structure. But as long as you find your way back, and in our training module on music, our cross-training, we'll bring out some of these concepts, because when you can do them in your real life and you can actually affect a project with these kind of principles, you'll discover that there's a lot of power in so doing that. Sometimes that's considered or called controlled chaos, and there's purpose to it. But that's what the physical arena is. It is absolutely controlled chaos, and you need to be able to recognize both ends of the spectrum in every aspect of from a worldwide, a universal aspect, all the way down to a microbiological aspect. You need to be able to recognize the poles and the disparities between the extremes, and then the parallels in gradation as you get closer to what is center. And you need to know what center is. What's the brightest the sky can get, and what's the darkest the sky can get. And then ask yourself, what is center? And where do I fit? And what is my preferred environment when it is? Are you the kind of person that when it gets cloudy and there's rain in the air and whatever, but just from purely a visual standpoint, do you like it when the light is somewhat subdued? Or do you find yourself more encouraged by an incredibly bright day where the sun is just shining throughout the sky, and the sky is as blue can be, and it literally hurts your eyes to go outside, but you just find that so exhilarating? You need to find these extremes and that middle and know where you prefer to be, and then recognize that you don't always probably prefer to be like that all the time. That there are times when you want one way or another, and you need to pad and work with your physical arena to support those different extremes in that center. Okay, so we beat it up good enough here. That's the personality of the physical arena. It's just a little bit bipolar, and it's just can be a little bit difficult to manage. And as a result, the frequency that comes in can very much affect the very next arena. Now, obviously, the central arena is a passive arena, so what I'm talking about is it can incredibly affect that emotional arena. And when we get to the emotional arena, we'll discuss that, because one great way to control the emotional arena is to just simply control the input, and you can do that both through the central arena as well as the physical. We are going to end this. This is the first part of the module on the physical arena. So we're going to end here and pick it up in the next one. So we'll see you over there.